Hey everyone, my name is Alexander Serhienko. We are developing the A1 app. Today's vlog will be very interesting because I'll tell you the story of creating 5 characters in 5 very famous companies which you all know, and these characters bring their companies billions, a lot of billions. Moreover, perhaps this video will inspire you to think about creating a character as a cool marketing move, and maybe you can come up with something for your companies and apply this idea. As the third point, I'll tell you the story of creating our character, Mr. Cat. Am I showing it right? I think so. So let's go. The first company will be known and beloved by all of us from our childhood, Disney. I don't even know how many cartoons I watched from them, but certainly a lot. In my childhood, I was familiar with all their characters, and there were cartoons that I watched 500 times and more. I would watch, then rewind, watch again, then watch again, and so on. Perhaps it varies for everyone, but generally one of the iconic characters associated with Disney is Mickey Mouse. One interesting fact about Mickey Mouse is that he was not drawn by Walt Disney, as commonly believed. He was created by the invited illustrator Up Iwerks. Later, he founded his animation studio, had some disagreements with Walt Disney, and essentially became his competitor. But, skipping ahead a bit in history, they eventually started working again and had mutually beneficial iterations. By the way, the first major success for Disney and Up Iwerks was not Mickey Mouse, but a character named Oswald, the Lucky Rabbit, who is quite similar to Mickey. And they developed this character for Universal Studios. Also, the first cartoons actually had no sound, and when it was finally introduced, Walt Disney provided the voiceover himself for quite some time. When they had the large volume of work, he simply couldn't do it all, and at that point he delegated to other voice actors who voiced Mickey Mouse. So later, at a certain point when the studio was growing, when they had a large volume of work, he simply couldn't do it all, and at that point he delegated to other voice actors who voiced Mickey. In general, Disney might not be the best example, as they have too many iconic characters. But in any case, when you think of Disney, most likely one of the characters will be Mickey Mouse. He earned the company billions and made a significant contribution to its history. What character is associated with McDonald's company? That's right, Ronald McDonald. And this character initially looked creepy. Really creepy. I don't know, even in the current version he still looks a bit creepy to me. I can't say I'm scared of clowns or have any phobia, but somehow, I don't know, he just doesn't inspire trust in me. But that's just a subjective opinion. Most probably you wouldn't recognize the original version of Ronald McDonald. He was created by a weatherman named Scott Willard, who was quite well known in the US, and he was hosting a weather forecasting TV show. So, the character Bozo the Clown actually appeared first in the book Joy of Living, and later on TV, and he was portrayed by Scott Willard himself. After gaining popularity, the fast food chain McDonald's, which was rapidly expanding at the time, invited Scott Willard to create their character, a character similar but not the same as Bozo. Perhaps it was a well-calculated move by savvy marketers to create their distant character, immediately separate him from Scott Willard and promote their version. So this pleasant character was named Ronald McDonald. By the way, he could have become an astronaut or a cowboy, but he didn't. So after the redesigning Scott Willard's character Bozo the Clown, Ronald McDonald was created and modeled after a circus performer and clown named Nikolai Polyakov, who was well known at the time. To solidify his success and create a legend around the character, there were books written about Ronald, board games created, and he appeared in Sega video game. In 2003, McDonald's hired 250 Ronald McDonald clowns worldwide to perform various roles and work in the restaurants. McDonald always maintained the legend that Ronald is real, a character with magical properties who can travel very quickly and appear in different corners around the globe. Overall, he was a huge success among children, and Ronald brought a lot of upsells. He had many different controversies, and people both loved and hated him. At one point, he was accused of harming people's health while not eating the food himself. Then he was loved again, and so on. This character has a rich history with its ups and downs, but it's evident that he made a massive contribution to the company's development and brought in huge profits. By the way, for those interested in learning more about McDonald's, there is a book called Grinding It Out, and also an entertaining documentary you can watch in your free time called Super Size Me, which is about the health impact of fast food. So the third brand probably known to everyone on the planet is M&M's, particularly their main characters, the red and yellow. I'll start with a brief history of the brand itself, as the history is interesting and significant for Ukrainians as well, as its roots trace back to military reality. In 1932, Forrest Mars went to England and began producing chocolate bars for the troops of soldiers. And during the Spanish Civil War in 1936, he noticed volunteers eating candies covered in a candy shell to prevent them from melting. At the time, summer caused candies to melt, and seeing this kind of life hack was a golden solution. But there were issues with sugar and chocolate supplies at the time, and Mars found a solution and made an arrangement with Bruce Murray. Pay attention to the first letters of their last names: Mars, Murray, Mars, Murray. So, Murray was close to Hershey's company because his father was the CEO of the company at the time, and I don't know if the term CEO existed back then, but in general, he was overseeing the operations and made an arrangement with Murray to ensure uninterrupted supplies of sugar and chocolate. Through this arrangement and function, he gave away 20% of the company to Murray, and from that moment, the company was named M&M's, short for Mars and Murray's. Later on, Mars bought out Murray and began to control the entire company himself. In 1941, M&M's were exclusively sold to the military and were considered a strategic ration because they were candies that didn't melt. Since the soldiers were already accustomed to their products during the war, they would become the company's future regular customers. By the way, until 1950, there was no official M stamp on the candies. When it did appear, it was initially black and then changed to white, signifying to customers that the candies were not counterfeit. Another interesting fact is that M&M's candies were the first ones sent into space together with the Space Shuttle Columbia in 1981, as requested by NASA's crew. Moving on to the creation of the M&M's characters that we all know and that appeared in various advertising cartoons during our childhood, not everyone might have understood them, as they were often adapted for adults, but some of them were quite funny. In any case, M&M's are always associated with the two characters, the yellow and red. So, as is customary in the US, these characters were created with the help of a creative advertising agency. Mars hired a company that assigned two young creative managers to the task. These two initially didn't want to develop characters, as they thought that Mars as a company was rather conservative and wouldn't be open to a sharp, new creative direction. Second, in the advertising world, it wasn't considered very cool to work on advertisement for such a company. So, according to interviews with these two employees discussing how they negotiated and came to meet with Mars, they were not very enthusiastic about getting involved in an advertising campaign for Mars. However, when they met with the company's CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, at the time who was responsible for advertising, they realized that he was a cool guy. He was generally open to creative ideas and he gave them the green light for any creative work. So they began developing those well-known characters after this. After creating the characters, they returned to the CMO and proposed 6 characters. He was surprised and said that he wasn't sure if they could handle all 6 at once. It was a large marketing budget, and to establish an associative connection with users, they needed to gradually talk about these characters over and over again. But those guys from creative agency said that perhaps everything would be fine and company could cover the budget if it was spread over 10 years. The first two characters, red and yellow, had their unique personalities. They were designed based on famous characters like Flintstones and Don Quixote with Sancho Panza. Red was witty and clever, while yellow was portrayed as a bit silly and kind-hearted. So they created 6 characters, and the CMO of Mars approved all of them. Each character was given its role and responsibility in promoting the product. Each one had a different taste, some with nuts, some without, some with almonds, and so on. In general, they endowed these characters with individuality, and in the future, they created a large number of various creative advertisements based on these characters, which were indeed funny and entertaining. By the way, I also thought about how we've been able to create several characters right away, even though our main character is Mr. Kid. However, looking at our sticker pack, we already have a pigeon character with which we can make some advertisements as well. We have fish, we have bull, all custom made. And also we do have the other cats of different colors. So in the future, we could organize a series of advertisements and create like animations cartoon or something like this. Maybe some other things. We're already thinking about it, and we have already some short animations which are like, kind of homemade and budget friendly on Instagram. But honestly, it would be so cool to achieve a level in the future where we are making high quality animated cartoons with themes related to business development and to make them for children and business education. I believe it's much needed in our society, and in my childhood there was no business education or financial literacy. Now, of course, it's more common, and probably it's available in expensive British schools in Ukraine or somewhere like that. But by the way, talking to my friends and to some people used to send their children to such schools, even in British type schools, there isn't a strong emphasis on business. So I think the children lack of business content, and this is a niche that could be addressed. However, I'd like to do it with great cartoons, a quality cartoon, and I think that it could cost around like $20,000 maybe per 20 minutes of content, even higher for future films. For instance, Pixar, their full-length animation films cost around $150 to $100 million. Well, those are cool animations with a lot of different processes and so on, but honestly, just can you imagine the budget? So I believe a high-quality 20-minute cartoon, interesting and engaging, would cost maybe around $20,000 or something like that. But now some technologies allow you to do first drawings of characters and then use some kind of sensors that replicate all your movements. They significantly reduce the cost. So returning to M&Ms, even though these 6 characters were initially created to promote M&M's chocolate candies, they later became iconic and sold a lot more than just chocolate. So this creative team from the marketing agency shares in their story that when they were pitching their characters and developing them for Mars company, there were many people present, and someone even said something like, "Girl, our company deals with chocolate, not toys." And later, after they opened their store in Times Square and sold lots of products for millions of dollars, this narrative changed. And this girl from the creative company even said that she was corresponding with the CEO of Mars, and narrative overall changed. So all this process led to the creation of an additional branch with a new product that, as far as I understand, Mars himself didn't originally consider. And it emerged on its own, both through the creative team and the advertising agency. So the next company is the well-known Duracell. The company has been in the market for over 100 years. And when you think of their batteries, an image of a rabbit usually comes to mind, which they use in various advertisements. During this time, over 100 years, the company had several owners, and it is currently mostly owned by Berkshire Hathaway, with very well known to all of us Warren Buffett as its owner. The most interesting fact about Duracell's mascot is that Energizer, another battery company, created nearly identical mascot. The only difference was that they added glasses and flip-flops to their pink rabbit. According to the timeline, Duracell's pink bunny was first introduced in the 1970s in a net with a large number of bunnies. The Duracell Bunny is the last one still beating the drum, symbolizing that Duracell batteries are the longest lasting. Energizer's Bunny, on the other hand, was a different mascot used in the 1980s. So this confusion between the two rabbits eventually led to a legal dispute that was resolved in the United States. The result of the legal process was that Energizer's Bunny could be used in North America, in Canada, and some other country, while Duracell could use it in the rest of the world, including Europe. So, two similar mascots that people confused with each other essentially were owned by different companies. It's unknown whether Energizer's move to replicate the rabbit was a carefully planned strategic move, but it certainly generated buzz around their bunny and gave a huge PR impact. So people were actually confusing those two mascots, and they were essentially owned by two different companies. And I'm not sure about Energizer's moves and what did they think in their PR department, but I think that it was kind of well-planned move just to get some additional media attention around their company, because that time Duracell was kind of headliner and very famous, and everyone knew them for their batteries and their bunny. In my fifth story, there will be a bit more research and information, as this is generally interesting. In 1889, which is like the year of my birthday, but 100 years earlier, brothers Edouard and André Michelin created a company that is now one of the 30 oldest in France, and it is called Michelin. I have troubles with names, so I'll just read it. In 1829, Edouard Dubré married a Scottish woman named Elizabeth Pugh Barker. She was the niece of Charles Mackintosh, the inventor and chemist. At the time, Mackintosh was involved in inventions and experiments in his stable, and people used to laugh at him, as this usually happened, but the man eventually created the world's first waterproof rubberized coat in 1823, which he later patented and was named after him. Later, Elizabeth Pugh Barker, his niece, created toy balls for children made of rubber. For a while, she made them by hand, manually, until her husband invented a machine that helped automate the process. After that, Elizabeth's husband, Edouard Dubré, opened a small business to manufacture agricultural machinery and the same rubber balls that his wife had invented. However, to expand and become more powerful, he invited Aristide Barbier, his cousin, and together they started producing. They were quite successful, everything went well for them, and the factory grew into a fairly large enterprise. But after they both died, this was bad news. After this happened, their business gradually declined, problems arose, people started getting laid off, and so on. To rectify the situation, in 1886, a 33-year-old André Michelin came from Paris to Clermont-Ferrand. He was the grandson of Aristide Barbier, and he started taking care of the business. He was very promising, intelligent, and energetic, as people described him. He took over the business in the state it was in and gradually began to improve it. 3 years later, André more or less got things under control in production, and he invited his brother, Edouard Michelin, to help him further develop the company. At that time, as I understand, Edouard was doing well, had an art studio in Paris, so a glamorous high society life, and so on. But at the same time, he closed it and came to help his brother. From that moment, the company began to be called Michelin & Co. Initially, the company manufactured bicycle tires, and in 1891, they patented their pneumatic tire. In the same year, using those tires, cyclist Charles Theron won the Paris-Brest-Paris race, leading to significant market growth in the sale of bicycle tires for Michelin company. As a result of this bicycle race, the company's revenue increased fourfold. Interestingly, the idea of the pneumatic tire belongs not to the Michelin brothers, but to John Dunlop, whose family is currently the owner of Dunlop Tires. To this day, the company remains well known, and his name lives on after 100 years in specific products in the market. Returning to Michelin, initially they manufactured tires for bicycles, and later, over time, they started producing tires for carriages that were attached to horses. And then, over time, after the invention of some local individuals, as they called miracle machines, they started producing tires for these miracle machines. But the primary and initial product, of course, was bicycle tires, because their quantity was greater, and automobiles were considered a luxury at the time, and there were not so many of them. Overall, the Michelin brothers were quite creative marketers, and at that time, to promote their brand, they gave their tires to race car drivers for free. Of course, they had some selection criteria, and they gave them to good race car drivers. But this promotional method worked well. By the way, do you know where the Michelin stars originated? And do you know that these stars are related to the same Michelin I'm talking about now? In 1900, the first so-called Red Michelin guide was published, and it was in fact like Google Maps, but at that time. The guide initially represented a list of places that might be needed by a traveler. It included a list of hotels, gas stations, various restaurants, workshops, paid parking lots, and so on. It was distributed for free, and initially there was moderate demand for it, but it had a great future ahead, and today the Red Michelin Guide is one of the most authoritative restaurant ratings. The Michelin Travel Guide became very popular at the time, and for a long time it was also free. However, after the demand increased significantly, they began to sell it and started making money from it. The concept was that Michelin hired famous restaurant critics, and they anonymously, as mystery shoppers, appeared in various restaurants, evaluated their services and their cuisine, and then either awarded those stars or not. Nowadays, these stars of course have dramatic significance for those restaurateurs, and it is considered like an Olympic medal. And prestigious restaurants want to have these stars so bad. Moving directly to the character, and this character is probably known to absolutely everyone in the world. He is very recognizable and present everywhere, in all markets in any country. During the World Exhibition in Lyon, the man who was responsible for setting up the Michelin stand placed two piles of tires of different diameters on the sides. And when Edouard Michelin saw this, and he said to his brother, "Oh look, if you add hands, it will look like a person." So, hearing this idea from his brother, Andrew Michelin imprinted this image in his mind, and in 1898, looking at a caricature sketch by artist O. Gallop, which was originally intended for the Munich Brewery Company, but was rejected by them, he thought, why not create such a giant that would be depicted as a human, with tires and holding a cup with nails and glass, symbolizing that Michelin tires are not afraid of anything. And on this postcard there was probably a Latin phrase "Nunc est Bibendum," which meant now is the time to drink. So the character was named Bibendum. So Bibendum actually means to drink. Nowadays, of course, he is more often called Michelin Man in English, but in principle he is called Bibendum. And this Bibendum was depicted for a long time as a character who drinks and smokes. Now, of course, it's a bit funny and doesn't look healthy. It's unlikely that any company would use such drawings today. But at that time, it was normal. It was their guy who smoked and drank. In general, in the beginning there is some analogy with our Mr. Kid. Many artists drew him, and he looked a bit different. He was not standardized, but over time they found their image after he lost weight, gained weight, and later became standardized. The shape has not changed for a long time, and today is considered one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Almost every person knows this logo and which company this character represents. Well, it's time to talk about our character, Mr. Kit. But I think it's better if he tells it himself.
Hello, friends. This is not Mr. Kit, as you might have expected. My name is Teftel. Mr. Kit and I have a lot in common. For instance, we both love pizza. Once, while traveling across the country, I met Mr. Kit, and he told me how he came into being. So, now I'll be your storyteller and share a short story with you. Traveling on the Eastern Express, he showed me pictures of whom he could become. Unlike other cats, Mr. Kit could choose his appearance even before birth. That's what happens when cats live in apps. In reality, there were quite a few options. Oh yes, it was really not an easy choice. Mr. Kit could have chosen the look for the Wednesday series or become Doraemon's brother. But later, he found his own image. Of course, he didn't forget about pizza. He also thought about becoming a redhead. Indeed, for quite a while, he wanted to be a redhead. He said that Donat the dog is very cool. So Mr. Kit considered becoming a redhead. When he thought about being a redhead, he could even become striped and a bit Soviet. But he quickly changed his mind and returned to his previous appearance. And also, Mr. Kit could have become black, like me, Teftel. It would have been quite cool because he could blend in with the landscape at night. But when Mr. Kit learned the color of his home, he decided that blue would be better, and it was a truly fantastic choice. Mr. Kit was born on the planet Neptune and immediately started to fly.
So, that's the story. By the way, when you look at our character, what features do you see in him? Please write in comments, I will be very interested to read. In principle, that's it. Thank you for watching, please give us a like, I'll see you.